Taiwan, who's black, versus Takahashi from Japan, who's white. We'll get through the opening moves and then I'm really rattling off the moves here, so both players still very much in their opening book. And first pause coming after Takahashi's moves. So 2 years ago, Takahashi came along to the World Championships, and people were talking about him because he was a junior player. He hadn't qualified for the senior team, and he did exceptionally well, and came second in the whole tournament. Then the next year, the Japanese junior Fukuchi came along and went one better, and actually won the tournament in 2018. That year, I believe that Takahashi was doing his exams, so he took the year out from playing Othello. This year, Fukuchi is doing his exams and Takahashi is back. And when I spoke to him earlier, he indicated that he was very keen to go one better than 2 years ago. So when I interviewed Fukuchi last year and asked him the same question after a few rounds, 1 or 2 rounds, whether he was there to go one better than Takahashi the year before, he said a very straightforward yes. Essentially, I am here to win the tournament. And I wouldn't have put it past Fukuchi last year, and he won, and I wouldn't put it past Takahashi this year. But we'll see how things pan out. He is one of the, if not the highest rated player on the circuit at the moment. So, what's happening with the position? Takahashi has played an opening where he's got more of the interior discs and they're connected. It's a very even position where both players have a lot of options. There's lots of moves for each of them to look at. And that makes it difficult to analyse because I don't know what the players are actually thinking. So what I will do is I will just kind of point out some of the moves that could be looked at, and then if a move hasn't been played, we'll start considering some of them and the pros and the cons that they would have to think about if they were considering that move. So C1 is one of the moves that could be played here as black. It doesn't flip diagonally, so it's quite a quiet move. E1 is another move, F1 is another move, G3 is another move, G4 is another move, F5 is another move, E6 is another move, D6 is another move, A6 is another move. They're all reasonable moves to consider. Some more reasonable than others, but none of them glaringly bad. This is where strong players really come into their own, where there are a lot of options and there's pros and cons to all of those options, and they are able to find the subtleties, the subtle difference in in quality of move that allows a good result for them later. If you find a tenth of a disc difference, or better than your opponent consistently through the game, then you win. So a tenth of a disc difference, you win by 2 discs by the end of the game, all other things being equal. So that the person who wins by even 1 disc gets all the points. You do want your tie rate to be good as well, but it's more important to win than get a good tie rate. You've got to win before you get a good tie rate. Anyway, Chun has decided to go for E1. So this is an invite to Takahashi to choose how to play out the top edge. If white now goes to C1, which is a perfectly quiet move, the only disc he flips is D2, and that's completely surrounded, so it's good in that sense. But it offers the top edge to black. Which may not be a bad thing, because it's not as if white has a real shortage of other moves. Even if black wasn't playing, white could still play 3 moves before having to give away from the F3 disc and the E4 disc and the E5 disc. They can all be taken separately. So if white chooses to play C1, black probably wouldn't take B1, because white, if you're going to start taking edges, you want to be able to get a degree of control from that and start forcing the direction of play, and it doesn't appear that black would be able to do that, because white still has too many moves. So white has, Takahashi has indeed played C1. And now we'll see what Chun is thinking. I don't expect him to take this edge, I expect him to play F1 and offer it back to white. Just because, as I said, white has too many moves. He could play D6, and he can play F5, and he can play G3, for example, all of which are unaffected by each other. Each leaves the others still open. So I'd expect black F1 here, and then Takahashi will be the one who has to choose whether to take the top edge or not. And those considerations that we just had for black would then apply to white. Can white take the edge, and has black got too many moves for it not to make a difference? So yeah, F1 has indeed been played, and now it's Takahashi's turn to think. Does he want to take the edge? Does he want to leave it for black to take? And we'll see in a minute. And this is a point in the game when you will commonly find players stopping and thinking, because what they choose to do here affects the direction of the game. And in this case, Takahashi has taken G1, taking the top edge. So now the situation, the strategy is starting to solidify. What white will want to be doing, if you, as I said before, if you take an edge, do you really want to start being able to control the direction of play? Black doesn't have many good moves. But he's still got moves. You know, there's still a lot of play to come out from any area of the board. Although it's not his move at the moment, one of the things that Black will be looking at is that he can sacrifice b2, but if he flips b5, then he can't sacrifice b2. And if he's already sacrificed b2, then he can't flip b5, because if he does, white would get a swindle, and that is playing b1 without flipping the x square, making the sacrifice useless. Okay, so what we were talking about before Black, when Black was considering to take the top edge or not, we said that White had a number of moves that he could eke out, 3 moves that he could eke out from some of the discs that were there. He's actually doing that anyway, so what he's said to himself is, actually, if I take that top edge, I've still got these moves that I can eke out, so I will gain the tempo. After my taking that edge, Black will have to play, and then I still can kind of eke out those moves, and he seems to be doing that, which means that then Black has to find the next good moves. And after f5 by Takahashi, g3 would normally be a decent response, but the problem is that it flips the whole of the 3-row Black. So it gives white options of playing at the end of the 3-row, one end or the other, without flipping in that direction, and the potential of extra moves around there. And again, Black would be the one finding moves in that case. So Black may not play there, but it's not that bad. Probably a6 is being thought about, given that it does take away. If Black plays a6, then Black doesn't have the immediate option of sacrificing at b2 against the top edge anymore. But it doesn't give White any extra moves in that place, in that area of the board, so White would then need to be looking at the 3 black discs on the right-hand side. Okay, so Chun has decided to take that 3 column, and as I said before, it's not that bad a move, but it does give Takahashi the option of playing at either end of it. If he is considering playing at one end of it, it would probably be the right-hand side, h3, not a3, because he wants to leave a3 so that a sacrifice for Black at b2 is always risky. By risky, I mean when Black plays b2, he wants White to take a1, and then Black wants to take b1 and take the whole top edge. But as I said before, if b5 gets flipped at any point, then b1 doesn't flip b2, and so White can play b1 and then a1 and save the whole top edge with an extra move. So h3 would probably be the better end to play at if he's going to do that. He might also be looking at h5 because that extracts the... Okay. So he's played d7. So the idea behind this is h3 isn't going anywhere. I can do that whenever I like. So what if I keep playing down in the middle, keep playing where both players can play? Because then when Black plays there, he's likely to give White good moves. There's no, it's not conceding anything to Black. So black has taken a6. Now, as I say, that takes away black's option of a b2 sacrifice for the moment. And it means that white now is in a position where he is having to take the last moves at the outside, and he has got the top edge, which does get in the way of lots of options on both the left and the right hand side. It poisons the moves, it makes him flip in directions he doesn't want to flip. White is probably better with the f6 disc still being there, because that disc gets in the way of a lot of black moves at the moment. If he takes that, then black has options on the left-hand side of how to play out the b6 and c6 and moves down there. So h3. But even if he doesn't take f6, black can still do b6. So, okay, so Takahashi's chosen a3. It's not yet showing on Live Othello, there it is. So, as I said before, he could choose to play at either end. I thought that the h3 end was the safer option, but given that the left-hand side has now been played out a bit, Takahashi has decided that a3 is the better option. e7 is an option now for black. Still in this position, I mean, there's quite a lot of different options for both players. So the game hasn't solidified into a strategy that both of them are playing out now. They're both still trying to play strategic moves and tactical moves. And so by tactical, I mean moves that are immediately advantageous without having the full strategy in mind. So for an example of that would just be a quiet move. It doesn't give your opponent lots of choices. You're not sure, you're not really thinking about how it affects the rest of the game. You're thinking about how it can give you control. And there are strategic and tactical thoughts also of how the left-hand side is going to be played out. So, for example, black could go to a4 now and give white the choice of taking the left-hand edge. But then he has to ask himself, what would I do if black does take that edge? And because he's flipped b4 again, he's lost his sacrifice to b2 again, because the b column would all be black and white would be able to take b1 and a1. Yeah, so my original thought, e7 is what's been played. And the reason that kind of became a decent move was because a3 flipped diagonal all the way to the edge. So the e7 move it only flips in one direction, it flips internal pieces, and it's a nice move. So the other thing about Takahashi that made quite an impact 2 years ago was the fact that he was always smiling. He obviously enjoys the game and playing, irrespective of winning. Obviously likes to win, but both players very, very comfortable on time. An interesting option here, and without actually looking through any of the consequences, but just superficially looking at the board and saying, are there any interesting moves, would be E8. Because if E8 is played, B2, black doesn't have access to B2 at all anymore, so the sacrifice option goes away unless you can engineer it back again. But it also takes E3, which takes away black's choice of H6, which is another natural move that he would want to make in this position. And another natural move that white would want to make, black would want to make if white has played E8, would be F7, which would flip E6 and D5. And as it stands, black wouldn't have access to C6, except for the fact that by playing E8, he has flipped E4 and gives himself access. But he's doing something much more sensible, much less interesting in my opinion. He's taken his extra move on the left edge and is offering the edge to Chun, which is a very sensible option, even if he was considering my move of E8, because if black takes A2, then E8 denies access in the same way to the top corner. So black choosing not to take the edge. White really doesn't want to take this edge. It's a common position where you have 2 5 edges. That is, edges made of 5 discs that stick out one way or another towards a corner. When they are back to back, so they're not facing in towards each other as they would be if white took A7 here. I mean, apart from the fact that A7 flips a lot of pieces. Having 2 5 edges that stick outwards from the same corner is generally a bad plan. It's very difficult to make it work in your favour. So the question is, what can Aki.htm do instead? He's got C6, which only flips internal discs, but then it allows black to take A2, and unless white gets very brave doing the fun moves that I'm talking about of E8, then after C6 for white, A2 for black, black will also then be able to sacrifice at B2, so gaining an extra move. And if sacrificing the top corner, so if white takes A1, then black takes B1 and gets to H1, saving the whole of the top edge. So that has its downsides, but it does only flip internal discs, and it leaves a lot of the black discs that are on the edge of the play at the moment. It leaves those there on the edge of the play. We've already excluded A7 because of the 2 edges sticking out, so what other options are there for white? Along the H column, it doesn't appear as though there's any obviously good moves. He certainly doesn't want to play H3. H4 flips in 2 directions and allows, I mean, anything that flips G3 and G4 allows a very quiet move for black to G6, only flipping F5. So he wouldn't really want to flip both of those 2 discs. So the only option on the H side of the board would be H5. This flips e2, which opens up an interesting sacrifice of b2 at that point, because if you imagine from this position white playing h5 and then black playing b2, not flipping in the horizontal direction, if white doesn't take the left-hand side, then black gets to play a2 as well, and he's got lots of moves to make a good sacrifice. But if if white does take the edge, which generally wouldn't be a good move, then black could also play b1 and get lots of moves, threatening to take the h1 corner. Okay, so Takahashi has decided to play c6. Which, as I said, it's all internal. The good points are it's all internal discs. It still leaves the black discs on the edge where they were, so black still got to find moves. The downside is that if white doesn't want to take a7, which they probably never will, then black gets a2 whenever he wants it, followed by b2. So black has played c8. And white is struggling to find good moves here. Can he play out the bottom right-hand side in such a way that he gains a move? Can he play it out so that white has one more move in that area without the position changing significantly in terms of who's got control? And another thing is that if white flips e6, then black can take a2 without flipping diagonally. So it would leave an odd region up there that black can play into at their leisure. They need to be careful not to get swindled because, as it stands, if he played a2 followed by b2, then the whole b column would be black. Whereas if he actually plays a2 flipping b3, then b2 can be played more safely. But white would also have the option of playing it. So there's pros and cons there to be considered. Still, white doesn't really have many good moves on the right-hand side edge. F8 is an option. But it's not clear that it can play out particularly nicely for white. So I'm trying to consider what is available to Takahashi here, and I can see more problems than I can advantages to most of, to all of the moves that he has available to him. His choice is squashed quite a lot because of his top edge poisoning the right side and the unavailability of a7 without really not being able to play through. And black also has c7 at the moment, so that's a perfectly quiet move. It only flips one disc internally, d6. So white would really like to not allow black to play that, but there is no way of stopping him because there's, as well as e5, there's also g3, which would allow him to get back there. And one normal way of kind of stopping that after an edge move like black's c8 would be to do d8 and try and force black to take the edge, but d8 flips e7 and f6 as well. So Takahashi has played f7, which is just trying to keep the game flowing in terms of quiet moves, not dying, basically. If you can not die, then he's always... If you don't die, you've always got a chance. But black has got a lot of the control here. He's got a lot of the nice moves, and he's not particularly behind. So still things to consider. You know, does he want to take the left-hand edge now? Doesn't flip diagonally. Leave... If he takes the left edge, what does white do? Does he play on the right-hand edge? Or does he play down on the bottom edge? Neither of which look like they're going to play out particularly nicely for him, but black also has the option of h6, which, if it was black's turn and he had to play out the right edge, he'd be perfectly happy doing that anyway. So black has c7 and h6, both moves that he'd be perfectly happy to play at any time, but he could also take a2, and so working out the order in which he wants to do these things, whether he wants to let white have the possibility of taking the left edge. My personal preference of those would be h6 in this position. Takahashi putting his glasses on. See if the board looks any different. So I believe that Takahashi actually drew in the last round as well. Yeah, so h6 is played. And now white really... any of the normal moves that you would look at don't look very good. Nothing along the H column. Nothing along the H row. Everything leaves a natural response. So, for example, f8 leaves e8, and e8 doesn't even flip diagonally, so it doesn't flip f7. So it's possible that white might consider the possibility of g2 here. It doesn't look good in and of itself, and black still has c7, but the idea would be that black can't take h. Okay, yeah, no, he's not. He's going to play out the bottom edge, and I expect e8 just to be the natural response to this. And I'm struggling to see what white can actually get from playing out the bottom edge. But at the same time, if you can't find moves that are going to help anyway, so yeah, I mean, Chun is taking his time here, but I think e8 is a very, very natural move. If white then goes d8, black takes the edge. White would then have to play, well, white could then possibly be looking at a sacrifice down in the bottom right hand corner. Okay, so black's chosen to take the edge. That surprises me. What he's thinking is, if he did go to e7 first, or e8 first, sorry, he would flip e6 and then a2, the move that's just been played would flip diagonally as well, giving white access to b2 should he want to take it, but it doesn't look like a particularly good option for white to take that anyway, because it would be sacrificing against his own edge and not really being able to stop black getting in there. So he's chosen to do a2 first, knowing that actually the moves for white on the right edge are still bad, and even though black didn't take the move e8 on the bottom edge, it's still very difficult for white to play anything out, because c7 remains available for black. And in fact, another reason that he may have played a2 is because if white chose to play c7 to stop black playing there, black would have the option of playing b8, and although he would be sticking out into the corner, white would find it very difficult to get in there, because by taking a2, black has kind of taken control of a5 and b6. So if black had c7 and d7 was white, after, from this position, c7, b8, white just wouldn't have access onto that bottom edge. It wouldn't have a good sacrifice to the bottom left against the left edge. So white would have to eat up those pieces on the right-hand side. It's Takahashi down to 8 minutes, 8 minutes 40. Which is a sure sign that he's struggling. Not that he's so low on time, but just if it was a close position, he would like to leave more time on his clock to work out the full end game from quite deep. So he's played d8, and yeah, c7 is the very, very natural response. It's the move that's been there, waiting for black to play. Yeah, okay, so the move that I was looking at earlier, Takahashi has now played a few moves later, playing out the left-hand side and a couple of moves on the bottom first. So he's taken the diagonal. And as I said, the reason behind this move is that black can't take the corner immediately. So if white can play that move and black can't take the corner immediately, white gets another move, hopefully making that right-hand side, which was an even region, so with natural play out, if black could take the corner, it would go white, black, white, black, white, black, black getting the last move, including the corner. Black can't take the corner immediately, so he's not going to go over on that side, and white gets another move over there, so white gets two moves, makes the region odd again. White, G2, where he's just gone, black somewhere else, and then white in that H column again, leaving black, white in there. So yeah. So black has gone to G6. This flips E4, which allows access into the corner. Now I'm wondering here, and I haven't thought this through fully yet. I would probably. He's only got 7 minutes on his clock, so. But it would require quite a lot of thought. But I'm looking at the possibility of B8. The reason being that to take advantage of that, black has to play E8. And it would give him access to the corner, but it also gives white a wedge. It would give black last move in that region, so it's not looking too strong for white, but white then can play to A1. Depending on how the rest of the board plays out, it means that that odd region at the top becomes even at that point. But the other advantage is if black does play E8 after white B8, F7 gets flipped, meaning that white can then play H5 without flipping diagonally down the G6, F7 diagonal. And that would make that region odd again. So to avoid all of that, if white did play B8, black would almost certainly take the corner and just make an even region there now. So white is almost forced to play on the right-hand side first. And the inverse is also true. So if white is forced to play on the right-hand side first, then G6 could get flipped, and if it does, then black can play E8 without flipping diagonally, and that's normally a good thing. It puts a lot of pressure on white to actually take the bottom edge. Being forced to do things is never good. But that doesn't necessarily mean that something like H5 is not the right move in this position. Might also be looking at, although I don't think it works, H4. Just the reason I don't think it's a good move, but the reason that you might be looking at it is you might have a cursory glance at it is just because it does flip E4, but it looks like that could be got back easily. So he's elected H3. And as I said, that's the purpose behind the G2 move. It's to make what is an even region, to get 2 moves in there to black's 1, and make it odd again, so that white can hopefully play out parity. And so in a way, black now needs to try to find a way of playing out the board so that white can't just take advantage of the parity, which is the last move in each region. So I think that black will probably take the H1 corner here, followed immediately by H2, and then black having to make a decision about whether to take the right edge or the top. I think at some point white will consider b8, but okay, so black has taken the corner, immediately followed by h2. So white willing to give up that corner to get the 2 moves to the 1 black move, because he didn't have any good moves elsewhere. But now it's black's move, that's the point. Because white managed to get 2 moves to black's 1, it's now black's move. Black does have b1 available to him now as well. And the top left to bottom right diagonal is also looking quite interesting, because although neither player wants to do it at the moment, it's possible for both of them to take the full diagonal, to take the diagonal without giving their opponent access to the corner. For black, it's not so important if he does choose to take it, because he's got the h1 disc now, so he's never going to lose access to a1 and b1 depending on what white chooses to do. So he can play b2 quite safely, but because of parity, he's quite likely to have to play b1 first, and then white will get into a1, and depending on how the rest of the board's been played, either take that long diagonal back or be able to play down and pull out from that a1 corner, getting quite a lot of discs. Okay, so black electing to start building on his corner, and the b8 move from white that I was suggesting before. And the reason he, as I said before, the reason that he wants to play that is because, well, first of all, if you look at black's obvious, well, if you look at some of black's moves, if you look at b7, and white can go immediately to a8, and black doesn't have access to a7, so white gets an extra move and a whole big corner. If black goes to b2, that's not necessarily a bad move at all. White would need to find a move and would probably go to h5. So, or b2. Okay, so no. Okay, so he's taking b1, just taking stable discs. But is it going to be enough is the question. White will go in the gap. And is just playing parity. Is there any way that black can play? If black plays down to e8 now, it's also worth noticing that he flips e5 back, so the diagonal comes into play again. But if white takes it, then he's left an odd region for black to play out. So is there anything that black can do to stop the parity win? Can he get enough stable discs? And it doesn't look like he can. It looks like the stable discs that black has in the top right hand corner are not insignificant, and there's more pieces coming because white is having to make some sacrificey type moves, some moves that give black stuff. But he's doing so because he can then play out the board using parity, getting the last move in every region, and that should be enough to win the game. Okay, so yeah, so E8, as I said, brings the diagonal back into play, and Takahashi has got to take G7 as he has done, because otherwise black will play B2 and cause lots of nastiness. So it's just black trying to work out how he can get as many discs as possible while white plays what is probably the winning line. At the moment, it's not white's move, but white can't play H7 because there's a swindle in the bottom right. So black would get both of those two moves if white could if black can force white to play H7. And it probably can do this. Playing out very quickly now. Okay, so it's a black win. The parity wasn't enough. Very nicely played at the end there by Chun. Very nicely played. That was a tricky sequence to find. He had 3 minutes left on his clock. And one of the things that I said earlier in the game was that if white gets into A1, then he's going to, because he would have fat parity, would flip all the discs back. But the way in which Chun managed to find meant that the last move came in the bottom right, and it wasn't a long diagonal, so he didn't get to pull out any of those discs. A very nice play from Chun at the end there. Okay, and we'll see you for the next round.